finally have Martin out there this week?
Yeah, it's really good for Jack. I think we were clear. We certainly were internally around our expectations of him through our pre-season and the early part of the season proper. We wanted to take our time, make sure that he was well prepared to play, and he's got to that stage now. And I think we've also said publicly that we didn't bring him in thinking that we'd just see how it went for one season. We had a longer, or aspired to a longer tenure than that. He's only played the 2 games in the VFL, but he's trained really well before that, and has earned his spot in the team. And it's fair to say that everyone's excited to see what he can do.
How does it feel about going up against his old side?
Well, I can never accurately get a great read on that, and largely because every individual is different. But he was pretty forthright in saying that he felt he was ready to play and looking forward to the challenge. I sort of interpreted it more as the challenge of playing a genuine top 4 team, which they are. They've earned their position on the ladder, rather than his old team necessarily. Now, I think it was a fair while ago. I'm not sure how many players would still be left. David Swallow off the top of my head. There wouldn't be many, I don't think.
He's come in, like, I guess, with the history of some soft tissue injuries, just from, I guess, a club perspective, but also his work as well. How do you feel like that has kind of, since he stepped into the club, how you guys have been able to manage him and build him up, and his work to obviously get back as well?
Yeah, he came in with a really good understanding of his body, and what he needed. And it was clear to us that it was going to require an individual program. And what we understand as well as anyone that it can be very, very difficult within a program where you have 45 players to have everyone on a strictly individual plan. But we did prioritise him because we were so confident. When I say we, the people that actually look after that part, the performance team, were so confident that that would be required if we were going to bring him in. So it is kind of validation for everyone that he's got to this point. Now, anything can happen from here, but we're really confident that he's been given every chance to succeed and play well. So it's moved way beyond just get out there and sort of not get injured sort of thing. It's much more about performance now, and that's I think what's got us all on our toes watching him at training in particular, because he just has, I mean, the whole competition knows there's something special in there. He just hasn't been afforded the opportunity to show it regularly.
The Suns haven't had luck here before, haven't won a game. Do you read much into that record?
I don't, but hopefully I'm consistent. I'm happy to be called on it when I'm not consistent. But, well, I referenced it just before, didn't I? Like Jack Martin probably didn't play with many guys at the Gold Coast. Their team's so different. So often stats kind of catch me by surprise around kind of our history, and my I guess standard line is we're a different team now to the one we were in 2018, and I would expect that, or assume that that goes doubly at least for them. But again, you could spend a lot of time digging into the whys around all those sort of stats and still not give you anything that's actionable this weekend. I think the thing that's really relevant for us is just how good they have been consistently this year. It might be a little bit different if we were sort of saying they're top 4 after 3 or 4 rounds, but past the halfway mark of the year and they're still up there and they've been formidable. And I mean, the whole world knows about their talent. That's been there for a little while. But look, I think over the course of history too, you see teams, they obviously need to be well coached, which clearly they are. But in parallel with that, when you see teams that have a group of players that have played together for a long time, that's where it tends to click, and I suspect they're coming into that period now, unfortunately for us all.
You touched on the talent though. Does Mullen play that tagging role this week, and who do you decide that he goes to? If you choose?
Yeah, no, well, that's the harder question, which one. He tends to play a pretty similar role for us, even when he plays in the back half. Rather than the midfield, his method in the way we go about it tends to stay pretty similar. And like, it would be reasonable to say that if he kind of rolled off one player to the next one, then that second one's going to be just as dangerous. So, look, I don't think he has played some really good roles for us, but it would be slightly misleading to think that he's just a lockdown player who has a specific role every week. We're a bit more flexible than that.
Did you think about holding Danger back for one more week, or is it a case of he knows his body best in this situation?
Yeah, he and our performance team know the, I guess the footy part where I sort of have a little bit more influences around the tolerance for risk, and I think the assessment would be that last week was the extra week, if we were going to think about it that way. But he's again trained really well for a few weeks, and probably that in the context of previous hamstring issues he's had, this is right at the minor end, and we probably would have pushed him a little bit harder, if we were in the last couple of games of the season, but didn't feel the need to do that. So he's definitely right.
Chris, did you start to see signs, I know you've managed you this week, but did you start to see signs of the wheel starting to turn for Ollie Henry? Is it a fair assessment that by the first half of the year it hasn't gone the way Ollie would like to have gone in terms of just finding a bit of the footy?
Yeah, well, we're managing him out this week, so we are thinking a bit more of the second half of the season for Ollie. But I mean, we've seen signs throughout the whole year, and he set a pretty high bar for himself, and so it can also be difficult in the forward line as well. Like this is the good problem to have, sort of thing. Like when I hear that, how do you sort of work around Cameron and Dangerfield and Henry and Stengel? It's like, give me those problems any day, rather than we haven't got enough sort of firepower in our forward half. But there is a genuine question there around sort of cohesion, and we've shifted it a little bit. But the reality for us moving forward is we are going to continually sort of shift that look in our forward half, because Jeremy's towards the end of his career, and so is Pat as well. So there'll be some evolution there, and Ollie will certainly be a part of that. But yeah, I hesitate to answer the question in too much detail, because it almost implies that we think he's been going poorly. We don't think that's the case. He probably just hasn't hit the heights consistently that he did, say, last year.
Jeremy leading the Coleman race at the moment. Do you look to spread the load a little bit more amongst your forward line? Is Danger coming back to be another option there as well?
I think it's every coach's wish, to have multiple options and make it a little bit harder for the opposition to predict. And I think one of the things that makes those guys very good players is that they do have sort of multiple modes. So, it's not a guarantee that Dangerfield will play big minutes in the midfield, but I suspect he'll be there at times. And Jeremy's up in the midfield, kind of whether we like it or not sometimes, and that's, I think that does contribute to a little bit of unpredictability, as opposed to sort of specifically thinking we have to spread the load. Look, if Jeremy kicks 6 or 7 or 8 every week, we'll be okay. I think it won't. I'll be surprised if it's a case of we think we're too one-dimensional. But yeah, our preference is to have a lot of threats.
Chris, high chance of showers. Winds northwesterly 25 to 35 k's an hour. It'll be a slog tomorrow. Are you bracing for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get into winter in Melbourne. The game does change, there's no doubt about that. There's no point putting your head in the sand and saying, right, we want to keep playing dry weather footy necessarily if it's wet. But look, Gold Coast had some experience, in the short term last week in slippery conditions, and yeah, we feel like we play in those conditions a bit. So yeah, I wouldn't be going to bed hoping that it's going to be sunny and 25. I don't think that's going to happen.
Jack's goal celebration last night, what did you think of it? Do you think there's a place for that kind of celebration in the game?
I think this fits in the category of each to their own, and it'd be a much more interesting question for me if it was one of our players, but I suspect it'd fall into the category of me thinking, just because I wouldn't necessarily do something, or if I don't particularly love it, it doesn't mean that that's a position that the whole club should have. I do think there's a place for entertainers in the game, and then it's sort of up to them to sort of work out whether they need to refine their behaviour or not. I mean, even I think the old school way was sort of thinking you don't want to do anything that disrespects the opposition. I tend to think the opposition are harder to disrespect these days. They've got a bit more tolerance for that sort of stuff, but again, each to their own.
Chris, are you happy to talk to the, just I suppose, change at AFL House and the appointment of Greg Swan? Do you see that as a positive from Clubland to have somebody that's been in Clubland take a role like that he will take?
Oh, look, I'd hate to make a comment that implied that I thought I was representative of everyone at Clubland. I mean, from our club's position, we have a high degree of respect for Greg Swan, but we did and do for the current administrators as well. I think the part that makes the most sense to us is that role has grown so much over the last 4 or 5 years in particular. And the best administrator in the world, I don't think, could manage the size of that role now. So it just seemed logical that would be broken up. And I think we've been clear, and if we haven't, I'll be clear now. Like, we have such a high regard for Laura Kane as an administrator and for Andrew Dillon as well. And I think the recognition that, like, even the role has grown so much, even beyond AFLW, but if you just add that bit in, you think it's illogical for one person to have to deal with such breadth. So that just seemed like a common sense decision. And then to bring someone in with so much experience at club level is obviously something club people would support. I think it's very hard to understand the needs of clubs if you haven't spent sort of much time there yourself. And in essence, the way I think about it, I'm not saying I'm right necessarily, but I think the AFL football department, they have a role to do in terms of enforcing the rules and administering the game, but largely they're in service to the clubs. And if there's a bit more of an acknowledgement from that, because Greg's been at a club for a number of decades, then I think that can only be a positive thing.
Chris, what do you make of the situation unfolding in Tasmania at the moment? Obviously, the team up in the air, the stadium delays. What are your thoughts on that?
It's beyond my understanding to comment in too much detail. I'd probably refer back to our club's position, which has been consistent from, I think, from the day that it was first proposed, that Tasmania have a team. We're supportive in principle of giving Tasmania their own team. They've been a great feeder for the VFL, AFL for a long time, and I think that would be good for the game. But yeah, in terms of how it's all playing out, it's way beyond my understanding.